All right, stand by. 10 seconds.
Ready camera one. Talent. Ready camera two.
And cue talent.
One.
Roll to record.
There's a firestorm of controversy after an illegal alien who was previously deported 5 times shot and killed a young woman walking with her father in the city by the bay. I'm John Phillips, and this is The Rundown. His name is Francisco Sanchez. He has 7 previous felony convictions, but he was free to kill after officials, following sanctuary city policies, chose to ignore a request from ICE and released him onto the street. In a jailhouse interview with the local television station, KGO, he said, "Yes, I did it." Let's take a look.
You did shoot her?
Definitely, I hear that boom, boom, 3 times.
Did you keep coming back to San Francisco because you knew that they wouldn't actively look for you to deport you?
Yes.
He says it was an accident. He just happened to find a gun after taking some pills. He just happened to find it in a dumpster. When he picked up the gun, it just went off. Not once, not twice, but 3 times. The woman he killed is named Catherine Steinley. She's 32 years old, beautiful, just starting out her life. Her last words, according to a witness, were, "Dad, help me." He tried frantically performing CPR on her as she lay there bleeding and dying. In spite of his on-camera admission, Sanchez has pleaded not guilty. And there are now reports that the gun was stolen from a federal agent in a recent car burglary. But why was he even in San Francisco, after all, after being deported to Mexico no less than 5 times? In the KGO interview, Sanchez said he knew San Francisco was a sanctuary city where he would not be pursued by immigration officials. And he's right. San Francisco pioneered the practice of refusing to honor ICE detainers because they would rather pander to the Hispanic vote than keep their citizens safe. There's outrage, and some are predicting a political fallout. California Attorney General Kamala Harris says our policy should not be informed by our collective outrage about one man's conduct. So she wants you to take a look at this brutal murder. Just ignore it. Nothing to see here. It doesn't fit the pro-illegal immigration narrative that Kamala Harris and other politicians are pushing. And ignore the fact that she's one of the principal architects of the policy to release illegal aliens instead of handing them over for deportation. She's not the only one trying desperately to shift the blame. For instance, the White House is blaming Republicans. That's right, Republicans are blamed for this murder somehow. Let's take a look.
These efforts would be significantly augmented had Republicans not blocked common sense immigration reform. You'll recall that the piece of legislation that was blocked by Republicans in the House of Representatives actually included the biggest ever increase in border security. And that's why it's particularly disappointing.
So if the GOP had just agreed to pass comprehensive immigration reform with amnesty attached, of course, then the border would have been secured. Understand their logic? This incident couldn't come at a worse time for the open borders crowd, just as Donald Trump is being castigated for speaking out about the dangers of illegal immigration. So will the White House and San Francisco officials succeed in avoiding blame for this innocent young woman's death? Or has Francisco Sanchez finally lit the fuse that will lead to real change and more security at the border? To explore these questions and much, much more, we turn to our pal Stephen Green, the vodka pundit, who is live from Denver, Colorado. And here in studio, we're joined by stand-up comic and PJTV contributor Steven Cruiser. Now, Cruiser, politicians only respond to news stories when they think there's going to be a political fallout. If you go back to 1988, the Willie Horton ad, the Willie Horton case, may have sunk Michael Dukakis in his presidential ambitions. The brutal murder of Polly Klaas in California may single-handedly have been responsible for voters enacting 3 strikes and you're out. Sometimes there is a crime that is just so senseless and horrific that it galvanizes voters into demanding some kind of political fallout. Will this case be that straw that broke the camel's back that ends these horrible sanctuary city policies?
I don't know. The memory of the voters in California is not that long. You and I were talking before the show about the Jameel Shaw murder in 2008, which was horrendous too. Here's a kid doing everything right in his life in a rough neighborhood, in a rough school system, who gets shot while walking home one day. I mean, and there was outrage then. There were a lot of tears then. There was a lot of this going on at the time, and then it falls by the wayside. So I don't know. I think what's unconscionable here are the Democrats. I mean, first you've got the Attorney General of the state of California acting like this is an isolated incident, which it is not. This happens. This is called a logical consequence in a sanctuary city. I mean, when you have people hired to enforce the law who are not enforcing it, Charlie Beck, when he became police chief of Los Angeles, said, "I'm not going to check the ICE stuff so much. We're not going to deport people. They're going to be the arbiters of when you deport and when you don't." And then for Josh Earnest to get out there and pretend that there is no mechanism in place to enforce the border is insane. The laws are there. They're being ignored by the people running these cities. This is beyond disgusting what they're doing, the way they're trying to get out of in advance of this with the spin. If the laws had been enforced, this guy would not have been there. We don't need more border security. And we say it all the time because it's true. We need to enforce the laws that are in place already.
You know, Stephen, the collective response of politicians in San Francisco, Attorney General Kamala Harris, former DA of San Francisco, and the sheriff there, Ras Mirakarimi, is essentially, well, this is the cost of doing business. This is what happens for policy that we think is good policy. Sometimes you're going to have situations like these happen, but we shouldn't change the law because of it. There he is, the sheriff there, by the way, who has problems with domestic violence himself in his past. Are there going to be consequences for these politicians for coming across that callous and that detached from this crime?
You know, it makes me want to drink my lunch just as soon as we're done taping here, because no, these Democratic politicians in these big cities are virtually untouchable. If they were accountable, they never would have been elected in the first place, because there's not a one of these guys or gals that has any kind of policy or any kind of idea that does anything but to continue the squalor and the dependency that their votes depend on and their offices depend on. So no, nothing's going to change it. None of the people who are supposed to be leading and protecting us have any clue how to get those jobs done, and seemingly no interest in it either.
Let's bring this back to the sanctuary city policies, because so many big cities, including Los Angeles, San Francisco, New York, are sanctuary cities. One of the things that politicians say, and frankly police chiefs say the same thing too, is that making your city a sanctuary city actually makes us safer. Because if we don't cooperate with ICE, then people will feel free to talk to the police, they'll feel free to talk to government officials, and if we may deport them if they break the law, then they won't talk to us. So it helps us solve crimes. That is a flat-out lie. It doesn't make us safer. It makes us it puts us in danger of being murdered by these people and having crimes committed against us by these people. And this case is the quintessential case that proves them not just to be wrong, but to be complete and total liars.
Yeah, they've been trying to sell that in L.A. for how long now? If you suddenly stop deporting people or stop paying attention to it, then everybody's going to feel comfortable, just going to flood out of their homes and start talking to the cops. In recent months, L.A. has actually started to look at more beat cops again, saying that it's the personal connection that might be more important than which laws they're enforcing arbitrarily or not. So they're actually thinking of putting a lot more beat cops in rougher neighborhoods now, just to start establishing a community rapport again. And they're not even going with the whole, oh, we got to be nicer and not enforce the laws. You can't, if you're not enforcing the laws, illegality follows. It's pretty simple. It's like we're dealing with children here. It's like, okay, we're going to let the criminals. The other sanctuary city story is that we're just protecting the good people who want to send some money back to their families in Mexico. And oh, my heartstrings, they're tugging from far away. And no, it's protecting the criminals. It's protecting guys 7 times. I don't even know where to begin with this. I want to hit my head against the wall and then go drink my lunch with Steve.
Well, drink your lunch before you hit your head, because it may give you more
at this point.
less inhibitions of hitting your head.
Yes.
Now, Stephen, bring this back to federalism, because the way things work in this country is if there is conflict between state law and federal law wins. I can't imagine any other scenario where the feds just allow states to operate this brazenly against whatever federal law says. Imagine for a second that the FBI is looking for someone because they're a counterfeiter. And this individual gets picked up by local law enforcement and taken in, and the feds say, you know what, this guy's a counterfeiter. Can you hold him so the FBI, so the feds can get over there and take care of whatever federal charges we're going to charge this guy with? And they say, you know what, no, we don't cooperate with the FBI. That's just one law that we choose to ignore. They would shut them down in a second. Why don't they shut these cities down for operating in defiance of federal law?
They're wired in. They are untouchable politically. And you're going to raise a firestorm, or Washington will raise a firestorm if they try this. But the truth of the matter is Washington isn't interested in fixing this situation. It's not a Democrat or Republican thing. So we had the same thing under Republican administrations where these Democratic mayors are simply untouchable. But we've turned federalism completely. We've turned the 10th Amendment completely around on its head. The powers that the states are supposed to have, the feds appropriate as needed, and the things that the federal government is supposed to do, the states and cities are free to just do this to Washington however they choose. Steve said, Cruiser said, it's when you don't follow the law, lawlessness follows, which is just, B follows A, really. But we have lawlessness not just in the localities, not just in Washington, but in the way Washington and the states interact with each other because of I guess because of this living constitution where we don't have to do what it says and everybody's on their own. And we see the results of this, that beautiful murdered 32-year-old woman.
Last question before we go. When the Willie Horton ad ran, George H.W. Bush and Lee Atwater were accused of being racist.
Yeah.
When this ad runs, and you know it's going to run at some point because all these Democratic politicians are in favor of sanctuary city policies, although some of them, including Hillary Clinton, Barbara Boxer, Dianne Feinstein, are starting to move on that because of this murder. But the ads will be cut. Are Republicans going to be accused of being racist for cutting an ad about this murder?
They're going to try, and it's going to be hard to sell this time. I think if there is going to be any kind of a change, the Republicans are going to have to play real hardball on this, hardball on this, and go after them and just be absolutely cutthroat and not worry about the press. And as we know, the current group of Republicans worries about the press a little too much. And just as parting snapshot of how insane the world is, my native state of Arizona, which is so sick of the violence that's being tracked across the border, finally decided to enact a state law to be able to enforce the federal laws because the federal laws weren't being enforced anymore, and they got sued by the Justice Department. So not only are the feds not stepping in, they're actively countermanding any efforts to enforce the federal law now. So there is where you get the head slamming.
How about it, Stephen? Are Republicans going to be called racist?
Well, of course they will be. One thing to mention, though, Al Gore is the first one to bring up Willie Horton, and that was during the Democratic primary in 1988. Atwater picked it up from there. But I'll tell you what the difference is between now and in 1988. In 1988, you still had a serious Republican tender with Lee Atwater at his side handling the media stuff and playing hardball in a way that no Republican has figured out how to play hardball since. Lee Atwater died of cancer back in, I guess, 91 or 92, just still quite a young man. And the GOP has really missed his ability to gutter fight down there with the Democrats.
All right, that's all the time we have for today, but now it's your turn. Will Catherine Steinle be the last innocent to die because of our refusal to enforce immigration law, or will this tragedy, like so many others, be completely forgotten? Tell us what you think in the comments section below. I'm John Phillips. Thanks so much for watching The Rundown.